Welcome to the 2022 BIPOC Perioperative Leaders to Know. My name is Carissa Brewster. I'm staff writer for Whitman Partners. And today we have NaKeisha Washington, who is the Director of Surgical Services at St. Joseph's Medical Center in Stockton, California. Welcome, NaKeisha.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what drew you to perioperative services?
Oh, I was drawn to perioperative services. I'm about to date myself. Back in 1996. So I've been in perioperative services. I really didn't know what it was. I was just trying something. I was just a youngster in my 20s, trying to kind of find her way. I always had an affinity for healthcare because I am raised in a family of nurses. And so I've always had an affinity, wasn't necessarily nursing at the time, but I knew it would be something healthcare related. So I was just looking through the community colleges brochures just to see what was available. And I applied for the surgical tech program and the LVN program. I didn't get in the LVN program. I was accepted into the surgical tech program. Didn't know what it was or what it entailed. And so that's how I was brought into that. And I've been in periop ever since, and I love it every step of the way. It's been almost, again, I'm about to date myself, 30 years. And I love nothing more than being in the OR.
That's awesome. It sounds like you have probably some familiarity with other areas of nursing. What's the one thing or two things about periop that was like, just kind of lights fire into you?
So I do. I've dibbled and dabbled in other procedural areas in the cath lab. Not anything against the cath lab because it's still procedural. And so I would always take that foundation of the OR with me. However, it's two different worlds, and not everyone is ready for the shift in the worlds, and I'm okay with that. It's two different universes. I've also explored the area of home health care, but I would always be available for wound care. And so that still attached me to periop because it would be post-op patients that I would do wound care. So nursing is very multifaceted, is very versatile. So there's different areas you can go in, but my passion for periop, for whatever reason, I just like that portion of it. I love nursing as a whole because I love helping people. I'm a nurturer. And so you're able to nurture individuals, and not just with the act of being in the operating room, but just the touch of healing. Healing is nurturing. Touching and healing is nurturing. Just listening to the patients talk a lot of times is nurturing. Encouraging them is nurturing. Being there for them when they're going through their times is nurturing. And so that's what keeps me grounded in the foundation of not just periop, but in nursing as a whole.
How has COVID impacted your approach to leadership, and is it still kind of impacting your leadership?
I think COVID has really, and I'm hoping it woke a lot of leaders up. It brought me back to the staff. It brought me to the realization of, hey, maybe we should have really been listening to our staff a little bit more all along because of what they were going through. It was just really magnified during COVID. There was a lot of issues that arose with COVID that we should have been listening to in the first place, and we weren't. And so all of that was uncovered and unmasked. And so what I did as a leader um, was not really retreated, but I placed myself back in a staff nurse role as a traveler and took a staff position in the cath lab because that's where my leadership really started, was the basis in the cath lab. But I wanted to actually see, we as leaders can identify and we can communicate, we can kind of relate to what our employees are talking about, but you really don't know until you put yourself in their shoes of what they're going through. And so COVID actually pushed me into that because a lot of things changed. Life as we knew it before COVID doesn't exist. Okay, I don't even know if we'll ever get back. So this is our new norm and a new shift in the paradigm of what we had to go through. And so with doing that, I put myself back in a staff nurse position to relate to what the staff was talking about with the work environment, okay, with the burnout, with the training and floating to different areas, with realizing how specialized periop is, because again, the cath lab still sits under periop. And again, it just magnified and potentiated the position. And as a leader, being able to look at that as different aspects really made me understand. Again, we weren't really listening to our staff. We weren't. As leaders, we do what we do. As leaders, we lead. We shelter, but we don't always listen. We think we do, but we don't. So this pandemic really shifted that, and made me realize we need to get outside of the leader box and get back to really listening to our staff and the needs of the staff.
Mhm. During your career, have you ever experienced any racism or witnessed any discrimination or racism, and how was it handled?
Oof. I'll say this. Um, Racism, I think we all have, if we're honest. We've all experienced racism. Is it geared more towards certain areas? Of course, it is. That's just the reality of the situation. If we don't face the reality of a situation, we're going to forever be in denial, and we'll never come up with solutions in facing those situations. Have I ever experienced it? Yes, some things directly. It's not anything that was misinterpreted. It was something that was direct. And so whenever it's direct or misinterpreted, because we like to turn a blind eye, because we don't like to deal with things, um, you really, you're really supporting what is going on and not creating a solution. And so I'm okay with opinions. I'm okay with that because I'm not conformed to anyone's opinion of who I am. Um, Things will be corrected professionally. The comment was directed professionally. It had to do with hairstyles. And so some people like to associate hairstyles with characteristics. But if you know the history globally and not of just one people or a person or a group or an ethnic group, then hairstyles are not just associated with that. It's global. A lot of people are very narrow minded as far as what they see and what their thought process is. So I don't get upset with people, because you always have to look at, number one, who is it coming from? What is the resource? Okay. What was their upbringing? What is their history? Why do they think that way? And so I don't get involved in the aggressiveness of certain things, because I know how to professionally redirect people, and then they'll back off. Okay. When you educate people, because a lot of it is coming from being uneducated. A degree doesn't make you educated. A degree just means you know how to study and pass and progress, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're educated. So when you educate people, sometimes the light bulb comes on and sometimes it doesn't. But what I had to understand is I'm not responsible for them. I'm responsible for Nikki and how Nikki responds. And so that's how I deal with that.
Mhm. In your professional opinion, what can, you know, administration, executive search firms like us, talent acquisition professionals, what can they do to promote diversity and equity and inclusion in the OR?
I think people, not just in the OR, but just in general, need to look at the Q's and not the C's. So the Q's are quality. The C is color, race, ethnicity, gender. You can't use that as your basis for determining whether or not someone will be successful in a position um, in an organization. I think organizations, not just Whitman partners, but globally, need to look beyond their little box of what they think looks presentable and just think outside the box, because you're actually doing yourself a disservice by thinking success comes from one group of individuals. That is a false narrative, because we're all uniquely made. We all have unique factors, different factors. So we're many parts to one body, is what I always reverted back to. And we all have something different to bring to the table to make everything better. And it's not just from one side, it's from all sides, and everyone should be included. Representation is very important. Um, you never know who's watching. You never know what kids are watching. You never know what patients or anybody, just a bystander or anybody that you come in contact with. You never know who's watching, and you never know that representation could actually save someone. So representation is very, very important to me in the professional environment. A lot of kids that look like me, okay, need to understand everybody doesn't have to be a rapper. Everybody doesn't have to be one of the TikTok twerking girls. Everybody doesn't have to be conformed to that type of element, because we are a people of pride, of profession, of valor. We are a strong group of people, but only one side is shown in social media. Okay. Representation is a lot. A little girl that looks like me, with my background from where I'm coming from, we could probably come from the similar background, and they can look up to me, just like I had individuals to look up to. So you have to have those positive role models. And it's not just within my community, it's in other communities as well. You never know who you're strengthening just by your representation. Okay, even with patients, a lot of times with fostering care, representation matters. So I think it's very important that corporations incorporate that diversity, because it's definitely needed. If it wasn't needed, there wouldn't be so much talk about it on a national level. So the fact that it's being talked about on a national level should let everyone know that it is nothing new. It is something that has been going on, it has been brewing, and it has reached national levels. So it's now time, because everyone is reactive, now it's time for everybody to get on the same page and just move forward and talk about the elephant in the room, to have those hard conversations, because it's the hard conversations that people don't have about diversity and equity and inclusion. But those hard conversations have to be had in order to move forward.
Um, do you have any advice for somebody who is watching you and says, I want to be like her? Um, a person that's BIPOC. What's your advice for them coming up through periop?
I will tell them to keep going, regardless of what obstacles you come upon. Do not allow it to hinder you. Obstacles are made to make you stronger. It's made to make you think strategically. An obstacle can be in front of you, but how can you strategically think to get around it or to accomplish that obstacle? Obstacles are not there to prevent you from moving forward. I would tell anyone, change how you think. Change your thinking, and whatever you're thinking will change what comes out of your mouth. Okay. If you're saying you're defeated, or I can't do this, I can't make it in periop, I can't move up, then you probably won't. But if you speak the positive, and if you speak what you want, you speak that positive, and it'll manifest as the positive, and you can do that very thing that you think you can't do. So I would tell anyone, keep going. I don't think the sky is the limit. The sky is something you can see. There's a whole galaxy that you can't even see or imagine. So you always push forward, and never let anybody or anything hinder you from reaching your goals. And don't ever stop. Don't ever become complacent. Don't ever let anyone put any barriers on you of what they think you can do, and any limitations on you. They can speak it, but you don't allow it to, don't internalize it. So what I would just tell them, keep going. Even when you think you can't, that's when you push even further. When it gets hard, push back even harder, until you get to where it is that you really want to go.
And did you have a mentor at any point in your
Oh my
career?
God. Yes, yes, yes. I had to have mentors.
Yeah.
Mentors are great, because again, we're many parts to one body. And in my weakest area, I'm always aligned with God always puts the person that needs to be in my life at the right time. Where I'm weak, they have that strength. They're able to help guide me and redirect me. They're able to help me look at things a little different than how Nikki would look at things. But you have to have a mentor because you can't do it on your own. And a mentor is there to foster you to become your best. A mentor should be able to notice those characteristics that you have and be able to help pull them out of you. They can help cultivate that. And so that's definitely needed because we're not a one-man army. We can't do it all by ourselves. So mentors are definitely needed. I have more than one mentor. You just have to because we all have different strengths. But mentors are greatly needed, especially not just for professional growth, but any kind of growth. You need a mentor.
Mhm. From your experience, what are like three key areas you think a mentor should cover for their mentee?
Um, Transparency, number one. They should always be transparent. It's the things that we don't want to hear that what is it? Why is it escaping me? The things that we don't want to hear, the constructive criticism is definitely needed. So that transparency has to be there. Being patient because depending on how the mentee accepts it, not everyone accepts themselves. Okay. So the mentor would have to be very patient, very patient. And the mentor would have to be very supportive. So transparent, patient, and supportive is what I would say.
We touched on this a little bit with the earlier question with discrimination, but um, obviously we're dealing with a lot of, social friction in our country the last 5 years, and a lot of it's bleeding into the workplace. What are your thoughts on for people to handle this with grace?
To handle it with grace, because it does spill over into the workplace, and you just have to redirect people because those same people can be a patient. So, are you able to set aside your personal views to care for this patient? And so, if that's a question that you struggle with, then maybe you need to reevaluate your place in healthcare. Whatever your personal opinion is, that's your personal opinion. That's what again, we're all unique. We have different opinions. Your opinion is not necessarily a truth. It's just your opinion. But if it comes to the point to where it hinders you from providing care to a patient, then it's time, or when you start allowing that to spill over in your perception of a patient and how you would care for them, it's time to start moving outside of healthcare. Then you need to question, do you really belong in healthcare?
Yeah, that's a great answer, and it's the truth.
Mhm.
Yeah. What are some ways you think the industry can address the nursing shortage in terms of shoring up the pipeline? I know that's like a complicated question, but I'm sure you've thought about it, obviously.
Absolutely. So my mother is a nurse, and my mother has been talking about the nursing shortage since the 80s. Okay, so that's what, 30 years or so. So there's a shortage. There has been a shortage, and there's going to be another shortage by 2030 when all of the baby boomers are retiring off, and they're half the population. So nursing schools need to be very strategic in how their not necessarily their curriculum, but how their intake process. So they need to look at that. Hospitals need to be a little bit more flexible as well. A lot of facilities and organizations now only accept baccalaureate prepared nurses. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. However, nursing schools would have to be aligned with that. Now, I don't, and everybody doesn't agree with me on this, and that's fine. A baccalaureate prepared nurse and associate degree nurse take the same boards. The only thing separates them is a degree and the level of amount of schooling that they have to take. That is my opinion. I was an associate degree nurse first and went up the ladder. We're more clinical based than we are theory and book based. And so you have to think what is needed at this point. We need both, but can we bring in a certain amount of ADN nurses versus having everyone be a baccalaureate nurse? Because what I honestly think is that they're going to move and everybody, the entry level is going to be a master's degree. And when you set the bar so high, is it really realistic? It's okay to have high goals, but they need to be realistic as well. So we have to be creative and think outside the box of what we've been doing, because what we've been doing is not working. So we have to think about what can be done to safely have nurses to safely take care of patients and not compromise the integrity of nursing itself. And so that is my thing, always thinking outside the box, even from an institution level. Once the nurses, how can they partner with the nursing schools to enhance that? They could have some type of bridge program. There could be, I'll say, nursing assistants in hospitals that have a bridge with the nursing schools and they go up the ladder that way. That's one avenue. You have to be creative. We can't continue, because if we do, we're not going to, the shortage is going to eventually catch up with us to where we're noticing it. Now we can kind of play with it and manipulate it. But there's going to come a point, if we don't come up with a solution, we're not going to be able to do that. We also have to be creative and look at the generations, because it's a reality. There are certain, I'm not going to say what, but there are certain generations, they love their work-life balance. And I'm not mad at them. My generation doesn't know anything about that. We can learn from them and they can learn from us. And so we have to be creative and blend that. What does the workforce look like for them? And so it's not only the nursing school, it's the organizations as well. How can we tailor our practice to where it doesn't impact patient safety, but we also take into consideration the generations as well?
Yeah, because like the ADN nurses, I mean, didn't I know a little bit about the history of periop nursing, but like, didn't they get more clinical experience
Yes,
like
ma'am.
early on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. ADNs are more clinical hands-on because it's compressed. The bachelor's degree, it's more theory, it's more classroom, it's more theory based. You do need theory, but you need that clinical component also. So how can we continue to utilize the ADN nurse and not shut the door? And as my grandmother would say, cut your nose off to spite your face, and not utilize them when you need them, because we're all nurses. There is a such thing as nurses eating their young. And unfortunately, it's a reality. And I think when we do that and close the door to ADN nurses, we're just as bad as eating our young.
Hmm. What are your thoughts on like LPNs, the utilizing LPNs?
I think LPNs, so LPNs and LVNs can be utilized as well. So there was a time when LVNs and LPNs trained RNs. They trained them. Uh-huh. The LPNs and RN and LVNs would be the head nurses on the floors before the RNs became the hierarchy. And so I still think there is a place where they could be utilized. Again, they're still nurses. They're still nurses. And sometimes we are the worst because we look at a title of a person or a degree of a person and try to justify their level of competency. And that is far from the truth.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
I love talking to directors. I love seeing you guys in your scrubs. I just love it.